The day my fiancée left me, she didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She didn't even look sorry. She stood across from me in the restaurant where we had celebrated our engagement 6 months earlier, slowly turning the diamond ring on her finger as if she had already made peace with what she was about to do. "I'm sorry, Daniel," she said, "but I can't marry you." For a few seconds, I couldn't understand what I was hearing. I looked at her and forced a small smile. "Is this about something I did?" She shook her head. "No, it's about the life I want." Then I noticed the man waiting outside the glass window. He was standing beside a black luxury car, wearing an expensive suit and a watch that probably cost more than everything I owned. My fiancée looked at him. Then she looked back at me. "He can give me things you never could." That sentence hurt more than the breakup itself. I had spent 3 years loving her. I had skipped vacations, saved every spare dollar, and worked late nights because I believed we were building a future together. I had even bought a modest house. The house wasn't impressive, but it was ours. Or at least, I thought it would be. She pushed the engagement ring across the table. "I don't want a difficult life, Daniel. I want comfort. I want luxury. I want to know that I'll never have to worry about money." I stared at the ring. Then I looked at her. "You've already made your choice?" "Yes. And you're choosing him?" She nodded. I could have begged. I could have reminded her of everything we'd been through. Instead, I quietly picked up the ring. "Then I won't stand in your way." She looked surprised. Maybe she expected me to fight for her. Maybe she expected tears. But I had learned something that night. You can't convince someone to love you when they've already fallen in love with what someone else can buy. She stood up, picked up her handbag, and walked toward the man outside. Before leaving, she turned around one last time. "Daniel, I hope you understand. You were never enough for the life I wanted." I watched her walk away. She believed she had just traded a struggling man for a wealthy one. She had no idea that the man she had just rejected had been hiding his real identity from her for years, and soon she was going to discover exactly who I really was. For 3 years, my fiancée believed she knew everything about me. She knew my habits. She knew my favorite coffee. She knew I hated crowded places and that I always woke up early. She knew I called my mother every Sunday and that I never went to bed angry after an argument. But there was one thing she never knew. She had no idea how much money I actually had. When Emma first met me, I was driving an old silver sedan and renting a small apartment near downtown. I dressed simply, cooked most of my meals at home, and never cared about expensive restaurants or designer clothes. To her, I was just Daniel, a hard-working man with an ordinary office job. And honestly, that's exactly how I wanted it. My father had built a successful technology company from nothing. By the time I was 25, the company had become worth more than I could have imagined. But growing up around that kind of money taught me something most people don't understand. Money changes the way people look at you. People who barely noticed you suddenly want to be your friend. Women who wouldn't give you a second glance suddenly become interested. Even relatives begin treating every conversation like an opportunity. I didn't want that. I wanted someone who would love me when she thought I had nothing. So when I met Emma at a small coffee shop, I never told her about my family. I told her I worked in management. That wasn't technically a lie. I just left out the part that the company I worked for belonged to my family. For a while, everything was perfect. Emma used to laugh when I suggested simple dates. "Why do you always choose the cheapest places?" she'd tease. I'd smile and tell her, "Because I like being able to hear you talk." Back then, she thought it was romantic. I thought it was love. The first time she asked about my future, I told her I wanted to build something of my own. She smiled and squeezed my hand. "We'll build it together." Those words stayed with me because I believed her. After we got engaged, however, something slowly changed. Emma began noticing what other people had. Her friends started posting pictures from luxury vacations. One friend got engaged to a wealthy businessman and received a brand new car. Suddenly, our little apartment wasn't charming anymore. My old car wasn't reliable anymore. Our plans for a modest wedding weren't romantic anymore. Everything became a comparison. "Daniel, don't you ever want more?" she asked me one night. "I do," I replied. "But more doesn't always mean more money." She didn't answer. I didn't realize it then, but that was the moment something inside her had already started changing. She had fallen in love with the life she imagined money could give her. And soon, someone was going to offer her exactly that. I just never imagined she'd choose it over me. The first time Emma mentioned his name, she pretended it meant nothing. "His name is Victor," she said casually while scrolling through her phone. I looked up from my coffee. "Who's Victor?" "Just someone I met through work." She smiled when she said his name. I noticed it immediately. There was a softness in her expression that hadn't been there when she talked about anyone else. A few days later, Victor started appearing everywhere. He sent flowers to her office. He invited her to expensive restaurants. He picked her up in a black luxury car and dropped her home like he was already part of her life. At first, Emma insisted they were just friends. Then the comparisons began. "Victor took me to this amazing restaurant," she told me one evening. "That's nice." He said the food was flown in from Italy. I laughed softly. "I guess my homemade pasta doesn't stand a chance." She didn't laugh. "Daniel, I'm serious." I looked at her. "About what?" "About our life." She started talking about apartments with private elevators, luxury vacations, expensive jewelry, and the kind of wedding where people would spend more on flowers than I had ever spent on a car. I listened quietly. I could have ended the conversation by telling her that I could buy everything she was describing, but I didn't, because I wanted to know whether she loved me or simply loved the idea of what I could provide. A week later, she came home with a designer handbag. "I thought you said Victor was just a friend," I said. "He gave it to me." "Why?" She shrugged. "Because he wanted to." That answer stayed in my mind all night. Then she started coming home later. She stopped asking about my day. She stopped talking about our wedding. One evening, I found her sitting on the couch, staring at her phone with a smile. "Emma." She quickly locked the screen. "What? Are you happy?" She looked at me for several seconds. "I don't know." That was the first time I felt afraid, not because I thought I was losing her, but because I realized she had already begun replacing me. 2 weeks later, Victor invited her to a private event. She told me she was going with some coworkers. I didn't question her. The next morning, a photograph appeared online. Emma was standing beside Victor, wearing an expensive dress. His hand was around her waist, and on her face was a smile I hadn't seen in months. That evening, she finally told me the truth. "I think I'm falling in love with him." My heart sank. "Do you love him more than you love me?" She looked away. "I love the life he can give me." And suddenly I understood. She wasn't choosing another man. She was choosing money. And for the first time, I stopped trying to convince her to stay. When Emma told me she was leaving, I thought my heart would break in front of her. Instead, something inside me simply went quiet. She stood near the apartment door with her suitcase beside her. "I've made my decision," she said. I nodded. "I know." She looked almost disappointed. "You're not going to stop me." I stared at her for a moment. 3 years earlier, I would have done anything to keep her. I would have begged. I would have promised to change. I would have offered her every expensive thing she wanted. But that night, I finally understood something. If someone has to be convinced to stay, they're already gone. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not going to stop you." Emma frowned. "I thought you loved me." "I do." "Then why aren't you fighting for us?" I looked down at the engagement ring sitting on the table. "Because I'm not going to fight against your choice." She became silent. I picked up the ring and placed it in her hand. "You chose Victor because you believe he can give you a better life. I hope you're right." She looked at me, almost confused by my calmness. "You're really letting me go?" "Yes." She grabbed her suitcase. Before opening the door, she turned around. "You'll regret this." Maybe she expected me to tell her she was wrong. Instead, I smiled sadly. "Maybe." Then she walked out. I stood there long after the sound of her footsteps disappeared. For the first time in 3 years, I was completely alone. And it hurt. God, it hurt. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the apartment we had planned to turn into our home. There were wedding magazines on the table, a list of guests on the refrigerator, a picture of us from our first vacation beside the television. I almost broke down, but then my phone rang. It was my father's chief executive officer. I almost ignored the call. Then I answered. "Daniel, your father wants you at the headquarters tomorrow morning." I closed my eyes. I told him I wasn't ready. He says it's time. I looked at the engagement ring box sitting on the table. Then I looked at the life Emma had just walked away from. Tell him I'll be there. That night I made a decision. I wasn't going to chase Emma. I wasn't going to explain myself. And I definitely wasn't going to reveal who I really was just to make her regret leaving. I would simply move forward, because if she ever discovered the truth, I wanted her to realize it on her own. And when that day came, I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't be waiting for her anymore. The next morning, I walked into a building I had spent years trying to avoid. It was the headquarters of Carter Global Holdings, my family's company. 37 floors of glass and steel standing in the center of the city. My father had built the company from a tiny office with 3 employees. Over the years, it had grown into a massive investment and technology group with businesses across several countries. And somehow, I had managed to keep all of it hidden from Emma, even from most people around me. I wasn't ashamed of my family. I was afraid of what the money would do to my relationships. My father had once told me, the hardest thing about being wealthy isn't making money. It's knowing who loves you when the money is removed. Those words stayed with me. That's why I chose a normal life. I rented a modest apartment. I drove an old car. I bought inexpensive clothes. I even turned down the executive position my father offered me after college. Instead, I worked in one of the company's smaller divisions under a different title. Nobody needed to know I was the owner's son. I wanted to prove myself without my family's name opening every door. But now, standing in that headquarters, everything was about to change. My father's CEO, Robert, met me in the lobby. "Your father is waiting upstairs," I nodded. As we entered the private elevator, employees greeted Robert respectfully. Then they looked at me. Some recognized me. Others whispered. I wasn't used to it. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, my father was standing beside the window. He turned around and smiled. "You finally came back." I needed to. He studied my face. "Emma." I looked away. She left. He didn't ask for details. He already knew. Instead, he walked toward his desk and placed a folder in front of me. "Then maybe it's time you stopped hiding." I opened the folder. Inside was a formal document naming me the new managing director of the company. I stared at it. "Dad, I don't want this because she left." "I know." "Then why now?" "Because you've spent years trying to find someone who could love Daniel without knowing what the Carter name meant." He paused. "And now you know what happens when someone values the name more than the man." His words hit me hard. I closed the folder. "I won't use this to get revenge." My father smiled. "Good, don't." I stood up. "I'll build something of my own." He nodded, and that's exactly what I did. Within weeks, I stepped into a role that changed everything. My face appeared in business magazines. My name was suddenly everywhere. Executives who had never known me personally began asking for meetings. And somewhere across the city, Emma was still living her new luxury life with Victor. She had no idea that the ordinary man she had left behind was slowly becoming the person everyone in the business world wanted to meet. Soon, she was going to see my name. And when she did, she would finally understand the secret I had hidden from her for 3 years. For the first few weeks, Emma believed she had made the best decision of her life. Victor took her to expensive restaurants. He bought her designer clothes. They spent weekends in luxury hotels, and every picture she posted made it look like she had finally entered the life she always wanted. Her friends were impressed. Her family was impressed. And whenever someone asked about me, Emma simply smiled. I chose a better future. She believed that until the cracks started appearing. It began with Victor canceling plans. Then he stopped answering her calls. The expensive dinners became less frequent. The gifts disappeared. When Emma asked what was wrong, he always gave the same answer. Business has been difficult lately. She didn't worry at first. After all, Victor was rich at least, that's what she believed. One evening, she asked him about a luxury apartment they had been discussing. "When are we moving?" Victor didn't answer. "Victor," he sighed, "we need to wait." "Wait for what?" "My finances to settle." Emma stared at him. "What finances?" He became irritated. "Why are you questioning me?" That was the first time she saw a side of him she hadn't noticed before. The charming businessman was becoming impatient. Then one morning, she received a message from a friend. It contained a business article. Emma opened it casually. Then she froze. The article discussed several companies struggling because of a major investment failure. One of the companies belonged to Victor. She read the article twice. The man she believed was incredibly wealthy was drowning in debt. His expensive lifestyle had been built on borrowed money and appearances. Suddenly, all those luxury dinners looked different. The designer handbag on her table didn't feel like a gift anymore. It felt like a warning. When Emma confronted Victor, he finally admitted the truth. "I never said I was broke. You told me you were successful. I am successful." "Then why are you losing everything?" He had no answer. Their argument became so intense that Emma walked out. For the first time, she found herself thinking about Daniel. She remembered how he never complained about money, how he had been happy eating cheap takeout with her, how he listened when she talked, how he never made her feel like she needed to impress anyone. Then she shook the thought away. She had chosen Victor. She couldn't go crawling back to Daniel. But a few days later, something happened that made her question everything. While scrolling through the news, she saw a familiar name, Carter Global Holdings, a new leadership. She clicked the article. At the top was a photograph. A man in a dark suit stood beside the company's chairman. Emma stared at the screen. Her hands began to shake. The man in the photograph was Daniel, the same Daniel she had called ordinary, the same Daniel she had left for a richer man. She read the headline again, then whispered, "Who are you?" Emma stared at the photograph for almost a full minute. She zoomed in. Then she read the headline again. Daniel Carter named new managing director of Carter Global Holdings. Her heart began pounding. No. She searched my name. Article after article appeared. Business interviews, company announcements, photographs of me standing beside my father, stories about Carter Global's expansion and its new leadership. Then she saw something that made her completely still. A photograph from a charity event 3 years earlier. My father was standing beside me. The caption identified me as his only son and the future successor of Carter Global Holdings. Emma covered her mouth. She had known my last name, but she had never bothered to ask what it meant. Suddenly, memories came rushing back. The old car, the simple apartment, the cheap restaurants, the way I never cared about designer clothes. She had thought those things proved I wasn't successful. Now she realized they had proved something else. I had never needed to show off. Her phone rang. It was Victor, she answered. "Emma, where are you?" I saw the news. There was silence. "You know Daniel?" "Yes. He's not just some ordinary employee," Victor said. "I know. His family owns Carter Global." Emma closed her eyes. "I know." Victor sounded nervous. "You need to stay away from him." She frowned. Why? Because Carter Global is one of the companies involved in the deal that's putting pressure on my business. Emma's stomach dropped. Suddenly, everything made sense. Daniel wasn't simply wealthy. He was powerful, and the man she had left him for was now struggling because of decisions made by the company Daniel controlled. The next morning, Emma went to Carter Global. She waited in the lobby for nearly 2 hours before my assistant finally approached her. "Mr. Carter knows you're here." Emma's eyes widened. "He does." "Yes. Will he see me?" My assistant paused. "I said you can come upstairs." When the elevator opened, Emma stepped into my office. I was standing beside the window. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She looked at me differently, not with the confidence she had shown when she left. This time there was regret in her eyes. "Daniel." I turned around. "Hello, Emma," she swallowed. "You never told me, no. Why?" "Because I wanted you to know me without knowing my family's money." She looked down. "I thought you had nothing." "I know. And I left you because of that." I didn't answer. Her eyes filled with tears. I made the biggest mistake of my life. I looked at her quietly. "No, Emma." She looked up. "You made a choice." She waited. "And now you're simply discovering what that choice cost you." For the first time, she understood. She hadn't left a poor man for a rich man. She had left a man who loved her because she believed money was more valuable than love. And now she was standing in my office, wishing she could go back to the day she walked away. But that door had already closed. Emma didn't leave my office that day. She stood in front of my desk, fighting back tears. "Daniel, please, just give me another chance." I looked at her quietly. A few months earlier, those words were everything I had wanted to hear. Now they meant nothing. "Another chance for what?" "For us." I shook my head. "There is no us anymore." She lowered her eyes. "I know I hurt you. You didn't just hurt me, Emma. You made me realize that the person I loved wasn't the person I thought she was." She wiped a tear from her cheek. "I was wrong." "Yes," I said. "You were." She looked at me, almost expecting anger. But I wasn't angry anymore. That was the part she couldn't understand. My revenge wasn't going to be destroying her. It was moving forward without her. "I don't want anything from you," she said. I gave her a calm smile. "Then why are you here?" She couldn't answer. The truth was obvious. She wanted the life she had rejected to become hers again. But I had already moved on. Over the next few weeks, Carter Global completed a major expansion deal. My name appeared in newspapers. Business channels interviewed me. People who once thought I was nobody suddenly wanted to know me. And Emma watched all of it. Victor's situation became worse. His company couldn't recover from its financial problems, and the luxurious lifestyle Emma had chosen disappeared almost overnight. The expensive apartment was gone. The designer bags were sold. The vacations stopped. Eventually, Victor left the city to deal with his failing business. Emma was alone. One evening, she sent me a message. "I finally understand what I lost." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed one sentence. "I hope you understand it wasn't my money you lost. It was my trust." I didn't send another message. I didn't need to. That was my revenge. Not watching her suffer. Not humiliating her. Not making her jealous. My revenge was becoming the man I was always capable of becoming, and refusing to let the person who abandoned me when she thought I had nothing share the rewards of who I became. Emma had wanted a richer man. She got one. Then she discovered that wealth wasn't what she had been missing. She had been missing someone who truly loved her. And by the time she understood that, I had already learned how to live without her. 6 months after Emma left me, my life looked completely different. Carter Global was growing faster than ever. My father finally stepped back from the company, and I accepted the responsibility I had spent years avoiding. But the biggest change wasn't my career. It was me. For years, I had believed that hiding my wealth would help me find someone who loved me for who I was. I was wrong about one thing. You don't discover someone's heart by hiding everything. You discover it by watching what they value when they have a choice. Emma had made her choice, and I had finally made mine. One evening, I attended a small charity event. There, I met Sophia. She didn't know my family. She didn't know Carter Global. She didn't care about expensive cars or business magazines. We talked for hours. At one point, she asked me what I did. I smiled. Business, she laughed. That sounds mysterious. For the first time in a long time, I laughed too. I didn't tell her about my money that night. But unlike Emma, Sophia wasn't trying to discover how much I had. She was simply interested in who I was. A few months later, I finally told her everything. She looked at me and smiled. "So that's why you drive that old car?" I laughed. "Maybe I should buy a new one." She shook her head. "Don't. I like the old one." And somehow that simple sentence meant more to me than all the luxury in the world. Sometimes I still think about Emma, not with anger, not with regret, just gratitude, because losing her taught me something I could never have learned while holding on to her. Love isn't proven by what someone can buy you. It's proven by what someone stays for when there is nothing to gain. Emma left me because she thought I wasn't rich enough. Later, she discovered I had everything she had wanted. But by then, I had found someone who wanted something money could never buy, me, and that was the moment I finally understood. I hadn't lost the woman I loved. I had lost the wrong woman, and found myself in the process.